Hi, it's Katrina. From burials in clay jars to using germs to identify Leonardo da Vinci's art, here are 10 shocking archaeological discoveries. Number 10. Parthian Tomb. In October 2020, officials announced the discovery of a 1,000-year-old tomb in Iran's Kurdistan province. Inside the tomb was a human skeleton with a spearhead beneath its ribs. But perhaps the most unique thing about it is that it is inside a giant clay jar. The remains are thought to date back to sometime between 247 BC and 224 AD during the Parthian era. They appear to belong to a warrior who died from their injuries, as evidenced by the spearhead that probably got stuck inside when they died. Project leader Shoku Khosravi explained that in the Parthian burial tradition, giant jars usually played the role of coffins, and in the discovered tomb, according to the Parthian culture, the body was placed inside 2 earthen jars. Also known as the Arsacid Empire, the Parthian Empire was a major political and cultural power, extending from what is now northeastern Turkey to eastern Iran at its peak. The powerful civilization's religious beliefs, art, architecture, and other customs contained elements of Hellenistic and Persian cultures. The unique grave is actually one of several Parthian burials discovered throughout the country in recent years. In a sad turn of events, grave-digging machinery in a northern Iranian village in May 2020 was making room for deceased COVID-19 victims when they uncovered an ancient grave. It contained ancient skeleton fragments and a host of artifacts dating back to the Parthian era, including a sword, dagger, quiver, and arrows. Number 9. Ancient counterfeit currency. Around 1200 BC, during a time period known as the Late Bronze Age collapse, and several years before coin currency was invented, silver hoards were infused with cheaper copper alloys and coated with an authentic-looking layer of silver. In analyzing 35 silver hoards found throughout Israel, archaeologist Tzilla Eshel found that 8 were debased in this manner. This early counterfeit currency came when kingdoms throughout the region, then known as Canaan, often met violent ends. At the time, Egypt ruled the area, leading researchers to believe that Egyptian rulers were originally behind the dirty money, perhaps to falsely bolster the quantity of their silver stores. Moreover, the stashes were imported because Canaan had no silver sources. Sometime between 1200 BC and 1150 BC, the silver trade abruptly ended. This coincided with the downfall of late Bronze Age kingdoms, and a shortage of the precious metal may have played a role in the trade's collapse. The main takeaway from the study? In the words of Eshel, counterfeiting continued after the Egyptians left Canaan, but they were probably the ones who initiated it. Number 8. A constipated demise. A new study details the painful demise of a mummified man who died sometime between 1,000 and 1,400 years ago after eating mostly grasshoppers for months. Found in the lower Pecos Canyon lands of Texas, the man had a condition called megacolon, when a person's colon swells up to 6 times its normal size. He suffered from Chagas disease, which prevented him from properly digesting food and led to malnourishment. Chagas is passed on by parasites. During the final 2 to 3 months of his life, he was likely unable to eat or walk on his own, and it appears as though his caretakers fed him grasshoppers with the legs removed, the squishable part of the insects, in the words of University of Nebraska-Lincoln professor Carl Reinhardt. In addition to being high in protein, it was pretty high in moisture, Reinhardt explained in a statement about the research, so it would have been easier for him to eat in the early stages of his megacolon experience. All of this means that someone was taking care of him, and researchers are calling this an early example of hospice care. The findings are the latest of numerous studies on the mummified man since his remains were discovered in 1937 in a rock shelter. More recent research found that his body contained food remains that he was unable to digest, as well as 2.6 pounds of feces, meaning that he was extremely constipated for months. The detailed results of the study will be published in spring 2021 in an upcoming book called The Handbook of Mummy Studies. If you want more info, be sure to check it out. Number 7. Nazi Enigma machine. Divers removing fishing nets from the Baltic Sea in northeastern Germany's Bay of Gelting for the World Wildlife Fund recently found a Nazi code-making machine called an Enigma machine. At first glance, the diver who discovered the device thought it was a typewriter because that's pretty much what it looks like. Soon enough, however, the team realized that they had found something stranger. To keep Allied forces from learning about their plans during World War II, the German military used the Enigma machine to send coded messages. The keys did not actually correspond with the letter on them. Instead, they used anywhere between 3 to 8 rotors to type out a series of different letters and symbols for any one key. Enigma machines with 3 rotors were used for German warships. Those with 8 were for U-boats, which were responsible for sinking thousands of Allied ships throughout the war. The device that was recently discovered is the type that was used on warships. It's possible that the Nazis threw it overboard toward the war's end in a last-ditch attempt to keep the Allies from accessing it, according to Jan Vaught, a German Naval Association historian who spoke with the DPA news agency. Archaeologists are restoring the Enigma machine at a museum in the state of Schleswig-Holstein. Once they're finished, probably in about a year, it will go on display for all to see. Number 6. Human bone weapons. What do you make weapons out of when you don't have metal, stone, and bones? Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who once lived in Doggerland carved weapons from human bone, because why not? Doggerland is now underwater in the North Sea, but it was once a land bridge between mainland Europe and the UK. As the region was gradually flooded by rising sea levels around 6,000 years ago, the nomadic people who lived and traveled through Doggerland left behind numerous artifacts that still occasionally turn up today. The recently published research analyzed 10 bone weapons originating from Doggerland. 8 of the artifacts, known as barbed points, were crafted from the bones of red deer, while 2 were made from human bones. Even the experts themselves were shocked by this discovery. We expected to find some deer, but humans? It wasn't even in my wildest dreams that there would be humans among them, lead researcher Joanne Decker told Life Science. It's a mystery why the prehistoric people of Doggerland chose to create weapons from human bones, which were harder to find and a less ideal material than deer antler. The barbed points were likely carved shortly after someone's death, according to Decker, because it would have been much easier than working with dry bone. There were probably cultural rules on what species to use for barbed points, Decker explained, adding, "We think it was a conscious choice that had to do with the connotations and associations that people had with those deceased people as symbols." The barbed points were radiocarbon dated between 11,000 and 8,000 years ago. Knowledge is limited on how common it was for the Middle Stone Age people who lived in the area to craft weapons from human bones, but Decker's discovery provides a first step toward learning more about this practice. Number 5. Baby in a jar. Archaeologists working in the ancient city of Jaffa in what is now Israel recently unearthed a jar containing the 3,800-year-old remains of a baby. Burials like these are not necessarily rare and have occurred over numerous time periods dating as far back as the Bronze Age and as recent as less than 100 years ago, according to Israel Antiquities Authority archaeologist Yoav Arbel, who was part of the team that made the discovery. But experts have yet to figure out the reasoning behind these burials. Arbel told Life Science, "You might go to the practical thing and say that the bodies were so fragile, maybe they felt the need to protect it from the environment, even though it is dead. But there is always the interpretation that the jar is almost like a womb, so basically the idea is to return the baby back into Mother Earth, or into the symbolic protection of his mother." Jaffa makes up the older part of Israel's second most populated city, Tel Aviv. According to Arbel, it's been continuously occupied since 900 BC, making it one of the world's earliest port cities. Number 4. Paid to go away. After backing an unsuccessful candidate for emperor, residents of the Roman city Nicopolis ad Istrum, on the losing side, paid a hefty donation to the victor. This is according to a 2nd century Greek inscription on a limestone slab that archaeologists found while excavating the site in the early 20th century. The city, located in what is now Bulgaria, promptly sent 700,000 gold coins to Emperor Septimus Severus upon his victory. He gladly accepted the gift and responded with a letter that the town's grateful people turned into a 10-foot-tall, 3-foot-wide, 2-ton stone monument. Researchers recently restored the broken artifact. Nikolai Sherenkov, an assistant professor at Sofia University in Bulgaria, provided an updated translation of the inscription. In their letter to the people of Nicopolis ad Istrum, which is one of the few to survive the era, Severus and his son Caracalla told them that they accept their cash contribution. The letter also states that the people had taken the right side. Experts believe that the city gave this payment to Severus to prove to him that its people were trustworthy after they backed a losing candidate for emperor. The inscription backs up this idea, stating, "You have shown thereby that you are men of goodwill and loyalty, and are anxious to have the better standing in our judgment of you." But the money exchange between Nicopolis ad Istrum and Severus to get in the emperor's good graces is not the only shady thing that went on at the time. In his letter to the city, Severus falsely claimed to descend from Marcus Aurelius, presumably to bolster his perceived credentials, but the man's ancestors were actually from Africa in what is now Libya, and were not related to Marcus Aurelius. So, as much as the donation benefited Nicopolis ad Istrum, Severus also wrote it for his own gain by using it as an opportunity to legitimize his role as emperor. Win-win. Number 3. Gardening treasure. While weeding their garden in Hampshire in southeastern England in late 2020, a family found a buried stash of 15th century gold coins featuring English monarchs. Altogether, the hoard contained 63 coins and 1 silver coin, which were minted over a roughly century-long span. They depict several kings, including Edward IV and Henry VIII. The coins of Henry VIII also contain the initials of any one of 3 of his wives, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, or Jane Seymour. The reason for putting their initials on the coins is unknown, but the initials changed fairly frequently considering Henry VIII's many marriages. Another mystery surrounding the coins is why someone decided to bury them around 1540. In fact, nobody even knows if the person who buried the coins repeatedly visited the site to add to the stash, or if they only went there once. But they were definitely wealthy, as the hoard has an estimated modern-day value of $18,600. That's much more than the average wage in Tudor times. The family who discovered the coins promptly contacted the British Museum, which has been kept quite busy amid the coronavirus pandemic as backyard discoveries have greatly increased. The museum's Portable Antiquities Scheme, or PAS, works with people who discover artifacts throughout the UK to ensure that the items are studied and documented. As much as at-home archaeological discoveries are on the rise during life in lockdown, this find is particularly special. A gold hoard this big or from this particular time is rare indeed. Number 2. Germ-covered art. Leonardo da Vinci is known as one of the greatest artists of all time. A new study of 7 of his iconic drawings revealed that each piece of artwork harbors a unique collection of microbes. In fact, after making their initial findings, researchers were able to identify specific paintings based on this information alone. As unique as they were, the microbiomes among the paintings that were examined had enough in common for experts to sniff out counterfeit artwork or pieces that were stored differently. Da Vinci's drawings were found to contain a lot of human and insect DNA, fungi, and microbes that cause paper to decay. Most surprising to the researchers was that the drawings contained a higher concentration of bacteria than fungi, while most drawings and other paperworks of art tend to contain more fungi than bacteria. This is likely from the high number of people handling the drawings over the centuries and flies defecating on them. Simply put, many of the people, creatures, and environmental factors that came into contact with the artwork left an invisible trail on it. By studying the microscopic life forms that cover paper objects, researchers can potentially develop new ways to detect forgeries and learn more about a piece of artwork's history. There are possibly limits to how much these microbes can teach us, however. Although researchers believe the DNA dates back to restorers who handled the drawings during the 15th century, it is unclear how far back in time the microbiomes are left behind from. Scientists have yet to examine the DNA in detail, but those pieces of art are slowly beginning to talk. Number 1. Ancient Egyptian star constellations. Experts in Germany and Egypt who recently restored a 2,000-year-old Egyptian temple, called the Temple of Esna, found mentionings of previously unknown constellations and revealed the vibrant colors that the ancient structure was originally painted in before being covered in dirt and soot. "It looks like it was painted yesterday," project leader Christian Leitz told Live Science. The restorers carefully cleaned the temple using alcohol and distilled water, revealing the detailed carvings depicting constellations such as the Big Dipper and Orion. They also found inscriptions referencing Apedu and Ra, or the geese of Ra, the Egyptian sun god. The constellations mentioned in the inscription were not drawn out, however, leaving experts to wonder what stars in the sky they refer to. The surviving vestibule at the Temple of Esna is all that's left of the several temples that once existed there. After being used to store cotton during the second half of the 19th century, it was left neglected and filthy. It was only recently that the intricate artwork hidden beneath the layers of grime and bird droppings was again revealed. Thanks for watching! Hope you learned something new today. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon!